The wind howled across the frozen prairie like a wounded animal, carrying shards of ice that stung Elias Thorne's weathered cheeks as he trudged through knee-deep snow toward the shallow grave he had been paid $20 to dig. His hands, raw and cracked from years of coaxing life from unforgiving soil, gripped the splintered handle of a rusted shovel that had buried more dreams than bodies. Behind him, the undertaker's wagon creaked away into the white void, leaving only the echo of its wheels and the faint scent of cheap whiskey on the air. Elias knelt beside the open earth, his breath clouding in frantic puffs, and stared down at the woman wrapped in a threadbare linen shroud. Her face, pale as the snow around her, was framed by golden hair matted with dirt and frost. The village doctor had declared her dead. Consumption, he'd said, her lungs drowned in their own blood. Yet as Elias raised the shovel, poised to heap the first mound of frozen soil over her still form, her eyelids fluttered. A faint tremor, like the last breath of a dying sparrow, stirred her chest. Then, impossibly, her eyes opened, wide, blue, and alive with a terror that pierced Elias's soul like a blade. If you believe in kindness and the miracle of second chances, hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs hope, drop a comment about a time life surprised you, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that stir the heart. Elias dropped the shovel, the metal clanging against a buried stone as he fell to his knees in the snow. His heart thundered, a wild drumbeat drowning out the wind's mournful wail. The woman's gaze locked onto his, unblinking, her lips parting in a soundless plea. Dirt clung to her cheeks, and her shroud, once white, was streaked with mud and the faint red of blood long since dried. Elias's mind reeled. He had seen death before. His wife, Mary, taken by fever 5 winters past. His only son, lost to the same cruel plague that had left his farm a graveyard of withered crops. He knew the stillness of a corpse, the way it surrendered to the earth. But this woman, this stranger named Clara Hensley, according to the undertaker's curt note, was not still. Her fingers twitched, clawing weakly at the shroud's edge, and a faint rasp escaped her throat, barely audible over the storm. Elias tore off his threadbare scarf, his own neck exposed to the biting cold, and pressed it to her lips to warm the air she struggled to breathe. "Hold on," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. His voice cracked, unused to speaking to anyone but the wind and his failing fields. The village of Coldwater Creek, a speck of humanity carved into the Dakota Territory's endless white, had no love for Clara Hensley. She had arrived 3 months earlier, a wisp of a woman with a tattered valise and a cough that rattled like dry leaves. The townsfolk, hardened by blizzards and bankruptcies, whispered of her as an outsider, a burden. She rented a room above the saloon, paying with coins earned scrubbing floors and mending clothes until her hands bled. When the cough worsened, the doctor, a man with more debts than compassion, bled her with leeches and dosed her with laudanum. By the time she collapsed in the snow outside the general store, no one claimed her. The undertaker, needing the grave dug before the ground froze solid, sought out Elias, the only man desperate enough to take the job. $20 was a fortune to a farmer whose land yielded nothing but thistles and whose creditors circled like vultures. Elias had taken the coin, telling himself it was just work, just another body to return to the earth. But now, with Clara's eyes burning into his, that coin felt like blood money. He scooped her into his arms, her body lighter than the sacks of seed he could no longer afford. The snow swallowed his boots as he staggered toward his cabin, a mile through the storm. Clara's head lolled against his chest, her breath shallow but stubborn, refusing to fade. Elias's mind churned with doubt. Was this a cruel trick of the light, a hallucination born of hunger and grief? He had buried his dreams with Mary and little Jacob, nailing their names into crude crosses that now leaned crookedly in the frozen ground behind his barn. He had no strength left for hope, yet something in Clara's gaze, defiant, desperate, alive, stirred a spark he thought long dead. The cabin loomed ahead, its chimney barren of smoke, its windows dark. Elias kicked open the door, the hinges screaming, and carried Clara to the cot by the hearth. He piled kindling with shaking hands, striking flint until a feeble flame caught. The warmth was pitiful, but it was all he had. Clara's revival was no miracle of divine grace but a fragile, agonizing struggle. For days, she hovered between life and death, her body racked with fever and coughs that brought up blood-flecked phlegm. Elias, who had not tended to another soul since his family's passing, became her reluctant nurse. He melted snow for water, boiled the last of his potatoes into a thin broth, and spooned it into her mouth when she was too weak to swallow. His hands, calloused from years of gripping a plow, trembled as he changed the rags soaked with her sweat. The village shunned them both. The undertaker demanded his $20 back, claiming Elias had stolen a corpse. The preacher, a gaunt man with a voice like a rusty gate, warned that Clara was a harbinger of judgment, her survival an affront to God's will. Elias ignored them, barricading his door against their knocks. His farm, already a ruin of unpaid debts and barren fields, sank deeper into neglect. The cows, down to 2 skeletal beasts, lowed pitifully in the barn, their milk barely enough to sustain one, let alone 2. Yet Clara fought. Her eyes, once clouded with fear, began to clear, revealing a quiet strength that humbled Elias. She spoke little at first, her voice a rasp, but when she did, her words carried weight. She told him of her life before Coldwater Creek, a schoolteacher in Ohio, widowed when her husband fell at Gettysburg, left to raise a daughter who died of scarlet fever. Clara had come west seeking a new start, only to find a town as cold as the snow that entombed it. Elias listened, his own grief mirrored in her story. He spoke of Mary, how she sang hymns while churning butter, how Jacob's laughter once filled the fields. For the first time in years, the cabin felt less like a tomb and more like a refuge. Clara's presence, fragile as it was, chipped away at the walls Elias had built around his heart. The turning point came on a night when the blizzard raged fiercer than any Elias could remember. The wind tore at the cabin's seams, and the fire guttered despite his efforts to feed it. Clara, stronger now, sat wrapped in his only blanket, her coughs less frequent but still ominous. She watched Elias as he stared into the flames, his face etched with lines deeper than his 40 years. "You could have left me," she said, her voice steady for the first time. "You didn't." Elias shrugged, poking the fire with a stick. "Didn't seem right," he muttered. But it was more than that. Clara's survival had awakened something in him. A flicker of purpose, a reason to fight the despair that had nearly claimed him. He began to dream again, not of riches but of possibility. If Clara could defy death, perhaps his land could defy ruin. Spring arrived like a hesitant guest, the snow melting into rivulets that carved muddy paths through the fields. Clara, though frail, insisted on helping. She planted seeds Elias had saved from better years, her delicate hands surprisingly sure as she pressed them into the thawed earth. Elias repaired the barn, bartered his labor for a neighbor's plow horse, and fought off the bank's foreclosure with a stubbornness he hadn't known he possessed. The town, sensing a shift, began to soften. The storekeeper, shamed by Clara's quiet dignity, offered credit. Children, drawn to her gentle smile, brought wildflowers to the cabin. Clara taught them letters in the evenings, her voice weaving stories of far-off places. Elias watched, marveling at the woman who had risen from a grave to breathe life into his world. But the past was not so easily buried. The doctor, humiliated by his misdiagnosis, spread rumors that Clara's survival was unnatural, a pact with darker forces. The undertaker, still smarting over his lost fee, stirred the town's superstition. One night, a mob gathered outside the cabin, torches flickering like malevolent stars. Elias stood at the door, shotgun in hand, his heart pounding but resolute. Clara, unafraid, stepped beside him, her hand on his arm. "Let them see," she said. She opened the door, her frail frame silhouetted by the firelight, and spoke with a clarity that silenced the crowd. She told them of her daughter, her husband, her fight to live, not for herself, but for the chance to do good. The mob dispersed, ashamed, their torches guttering in the mud. By summer, the farm bloomed. Corn stalks rose defiantly, and the cows, fattened on new grass, gave milk enough to sell. Clara's cough lingered but did not worsen, a reminder of her fragility and her strength. Elias, no longer a struggling farmer but a man reborn, built a small schoolhouse on the edge of his land, where Clara taught the children of Coldwater Creek. The town, once cold, became a community, bound by the story of the woman who opened her eyes in a grave and the farmer who refused to let her go. If this story touched your heart, made you believe in the power of hope and human kindness, please like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more tales that move the soul. And before we reach the end, leave a comment telling me what second chances mean to you. Years later, travelers passing through Coldwater Creek would hear the tale of Elias and Clara, of a grave left empty and a farm that fed a town. Elias, gray but unbowed, worked the fields beside Clara, whose laughter now rang clearer than any bell. The crosses behind the barn, once monuments to loss, were joined by a new one, a marker not for death, but for the day Clara rose. On it, Elias carved a single word: hope. The story of the struggling farmer and the woman who opened her eyes became legend, a testament to the spark that can ignite even in the darkest winter, proof that sometimes, the earth refuses to claim what still has life to give.